Hi guys, welcome to another Flight Deck 2 Sim tutorial. In today's video I'm going to show you how we do a turnaround using my company's operating procedures. Now I've just completed a short sector from Dublin to London Gatwick. I'm just holding to the south of the airfield at a waypoint called Astra, maintaining 4,000 feet. I'm using live time and live weather. Current weather conditions in Gatwick are pretty good, expecting runway 26 left for the approach. With light westerly winds, it's cav OK, temperature of 7 degrees with a QNH of 1034. And all I'm going to do is land in Gatwick, taxi onto stand, try and do the turnaround in 30 minutes exactly as we would do in real life, then simulate doing the flight back to Dublin as well, just to kind of give you a bit of an insight what goes on during a turnaround. Now, I really don't want to concentrate on the approach part of this so much, so you can join me on a 4-mile final for this turnaround tutorial. Okay chaps, so I'm now established on ILS runway 26 left, approaching a 6-mile final, and we're fully ready to go get down flat 15 at 4 miles. So imagine we've been cleared to land. When we do that, just pop on the retracts and taxi light, and that reminds us as crew that I have been cleared to land before the forward facing lights are on. I've completed the landing performance. I'm planning to vacate here at Foxtrot Romeo, and then we'll taxi back to stand using 08 left runway 26 right, which is the runway that's closed today. Now, so approaching 4 miles, so let's start configuring to land. So gear down, flap 50 to the landing, checklist of flaps. So start switch is continuous, recall checked, speed brake is armed, green light, landing gear down 3 green, order brake is set to 2. Just holding for the landing flap today, and the landing flap I'm going to use is, I remember now, flap 30. So speed below 175 knots. Match the flat 15 speed. We can now select flat 30. Light steady winds, we can just select approach speed of VREF plus 5 knots, which is the minimum approach speed we can fly. 1,000 feet's checked. Complete the landing checklist. So flaps, we've got 30 required, 30 selected, green light. The landing lights are on. We have been cleared to land, and the landing checklist is complete. So the minimums at Gatwick for runway 26 left are 396 feet, which is 200 feet above ground level, which is the standard Cat 1 ILS minimums for this approach. Okay, so we can disconnect autopilot, auto throttle. Let's see how we get on today. Looking at the flight directors initially, and flat 30, our gross weight's about 62 tons, so we'll set an attitude thrust setting of about 1 degree nose up and about 57%. I'll just zoom in slightly to improve my view on the PFD. So PAPIs are showing 3 reds. I'm going to pitch up slightly. Sometimes the flight directors don't exactly match up with what the PAPIs say, but the PAPI is the primary, if you're visual, that is the primary attitude setter. So you want to know if you're high or low, use the PAPIs. Plus 100 is checked. Still 3 reds, a tab low. We can say continue. Back onto the PAPI, sorry, 2 reds, 2 reds, 2 whites. Oh, I can't speak today. Back onto the centre line, avoiding those 3 reds. Good, not too bad there.
40, 30, 20.
Check. Close the thrust, just holding the attitude. Back onto the centre line. Oh, very firm landing. So speed brakes up, little bounce, and selecting reverse thrust. Good. So we've gone for, can't really set reverse in this, but about 78%. 100 knots, 80 knots. And here comes 60 knots, cancelling reverse, and this should be November Romeo first here on the right. So some of you might be asking why I haven't done a tutorial in quite a while, but it's been really busy coming up to the winter period, and I have a horrific cold which I've just recovered from. I barely could speak a few days ago. Anyway, here's November Romeo, where we plan to exit, and like I've said in some of my other approach tutorials, in reality the first officer would start cleaning up the aircraft, but what I will do is just bring the aircraft to a stop, and just again, because I like to show you exactly what we do when we clean up the aircraft. So a bit non-standard, we'll just bring the aircraft to a stop. So vacating the runway, the first officer would start down here on the pedestal and turn the transponders out off. That means we don't interfere with other aircraft on the approach, but if they have ground radar installed, ATC can see us. Select flaps to up. Stab trim usually goes to 4 units, but I'll leave it where it is there just to save some time. Order brake to off. Hydraulics to systems. Standby. ISFD goes to off. Flight directors off. And airspeed to 100 knots. Altitude 3,000, just plus 100 feet to remind us we've not been cleared for the next approach. And strobes go to steady, start switches can go to off, and that is everything. Sorry, probe heat to off. Good. All the captain simply does then. FO does all the work. He simply stows the speed brake, vacating the runway, turns off the retracts and fixed landing lights, but leaves the turn off and taxi lights on, and also turns the weather radar off as well, so we don't provide any nasty X-rays to anyone on the ground. And that's essentially it. The aircraft's now cleaned up, ready to taxi. Now what I'm going to do is commence the taxi onto our planned stand today. We'll taxi along runway 08 left, 26 right, onto Alpha November, just in a straight line all the way to stand 3. And you can come back to me as I approach stand 3 to show you what we do just as we approach onto stand. Okay guys, I'm now on the Alpha November taxiway approaching stand 3, and what we try and do, we start the APU and time it so when we get onto stand, the APU is ready to be put on the generator, just to make sure we save as much fuel as possible. There's a bit of art towards it, but we'll just start it around now. So what it is, it's a slight left and then a slight right, and then we can see stand 3 ahead. Now another thing we do in my company, we shut down one of the engines, typically engine number 2, 3 minutes after landing. Now it's to save fuel. The problem is with the way Microsoft Flight Simulator works, if you shut down one of the engines and use thrust on one engine, there's a lot of asymmetry. The aircraft really yaws. That's not really realistic. So all I do whenever I use the sim is just leave both engines running. But typically you shut down one engine 3 minutes after touchdown, so long as a set of criteria has been met. So I'll make a left turn here. Hopefully the APU is ready to be put on the bus by the time we turn on to stand. Here's stand 3. And usually we'd make sure there's a marsher in sight, but Gatwick has the gate guidance, so we can use that to taxi on stand with an air bridge. So make a right turn here. This is all my sim experience of many years experience trying to come in here. I haven't used flight sim for such a long time prior to making all my tutorials, so really have been practicing a lot better than I was when I started my channel a year ago. It is a lot easier in real life, to be honest. Good, so there's the gate guidance. It says keep moving forward slightly. I think our position's pretty good. It's saying moving left slightly. Oh, there we go, back on there. Up. Brakes are really sensitive as well. Perfect. Just waiting for it to say stop. There we go, stops, and then we set the parking brake. Perfect. So if you look up here, yeah, the APU is ready to put on the bus as well, and also the captain would turn off and taxi lights coming onto stand, so it would blind anyone, any ground personnel close to the aircraft as we put on stand. Perfect. So now we can shut the engines down. Just before that, we confirm we've got 2 blue lights here for the engine generators, 1 red for the parking brake. And now we could shut the engines down. Select engine here so we can monitor the shutdown. And first thing we do, fasten belts to off. This no smoking sign, which says chime here, is to remind us the cabin is no longer secure. The captain would do a very brief PA saying, cabin crew disarm, slides, open doors, welcome ladies and gentlemen to Gatwick where the temperature is 7 degrees, blah blah blah. And then we do the transit shutdown flow. Now this is really simple, there really isn't that much to it. All you've got to do is put the transponder to, oopsie daisy, haven't paused my joystick there. Transponder here to 2000, and then we set standby, so no one can see us as we're currently on stand. Going to the overhead panel, we just simply put the isolation valve to open. We put the APU bleed on as well, and that's going to provide some conditioned warm air for the cabin as it's quite cold. And we put the anti-collision light to off when the N2 is below 20%, which it is. And that is all you need to do for a transit flow. Okay, very, very simple. The pilot flying would then call for the transit shutdown checklist, which I'll read for you based on my company's checklist. So looking at the overhead panel, electrical we confirm is on the APU, will provide ground power very soon. Fasten belts is off, probe heat is off, and we've got the anti-ice off, voice recorder on. Well, we usually have a switch here for the voice recorder. It's not actually simulated with PMDG, but imagine that's on. Air conditioning packs we can leave in auto, engine bleed on. We'll leave the APU bleed on for conditioned cabining. Conditioning air for the cabin. Exterior lights, we can put the wheel well light on for the walk around, which is what the pilot monitoring would do. Start switches can stay in the off position, auto brake off, speed brake is down, detent, flaps up, no light, parking brake is set, weather radar is off, transponder 2000 standby. The cockpit voice recorder is in, we don't need to pull it, and the cockpit door we would then unlock, and that is the transit shutdown checklist. But you saw the flow really isn't that much to do. Okay, so now we've parked onto stand, the air bridge is attached, we can check the overhead panel to see if the ground crew have connected the ground power or the GPU, which they have done. Now we want to get this on as soon as possible, that way we can shut down the APU ASAP. And what that does, it provides less noise and saves fuel for the company. If an airline has a lot of aircraft, the more APUs they can have off, it helps save a lot of money for them. And also a lot of airports have very strict noise fines regarding the use of APU. So now the passengers are disembarking, the dispatcher would come on the aircraft and he would provide us with something called the load sheet, which is the weight and balance of the aircraft for the next sector. The pilot monitoring would put his coat on, his high-vis jacket, and looking like the sun's setting, he'd take a torch as well, and he'd start a walk around of the aircraft. The pilot flying would then, for the next sector, stay on board, get ready to set the aircraft up. And the first thing he does is get the ATIS, or get the weather. Now, we'll just use live weather as I am at the moment. The weather hasn't changed from the approach, so it's clear skies, very light westerly wind at 2303 knots, 7 degrees, QNH is still 1034. Now, the rest of the setup goes as follows. He starts here on his EFIS panel. He sets up anything he might want, so airports he's selected. And what we set here is the minimum flat retraction altitude, or the MFRA. Now at this point what we set is simply the aerodrome elevation plus 1,000 feet. And what this altitude is, it's simply the altitude at which in the event of an engine failure we would climb up to accelerate the aircraft, and we set this for every single one of our departures. And also the pilot monitoring would set that independently. So all I'm going to do is set 1,210 feet, which is the Gatwick elevation plus 1,000 feet. And when we do the OPT performance later, we can fine-tune this minimum flat retraction altitude. Next, going down here, we can reset the clock for the next sector. Just make sure the DU display switches are in normal, change your lights accordingly. And actually, where we go straight to is pretty much the FMC. A lot of it's already set up regards to the aircraft configuration, but after touchdown the FMC resets for the next sector. So going to Gatwick, what we do, first thing we need to do is obviously say where we are, so we can put Gatwick as our reference airport, and then we put our destination, Dublin, Echo India Delta Whiskey. Our call sign for the next sector, just simply put flight deck to sim, or Foxtrot Delta 2 Sierra. And there's two ways of doing this. You can either put the routing in or the departure and arrivals first. It really doesn't matter. So the first thing I'm going to do is put the routing. Now on the left there you can see the routing today. Some airlines use the company route function. You can simply put the company route information. It loads up the routing. But where I work, we have to put the route in manually every single sector, which can be a bit of a pain, especially if you're doing 4 sectors a day. I'll just punch that in now, and then you can meet me in where I select the departure arrivals. Okay, so now the routing information is in, we can select Gatwick departures. Again, on the operational flight plan, you can see the expected departure, which is runway 26 left, and it's the Lambourne 5 mic. So select runway 26 left, and here's the Lambourne 5 mic. And in Dublin, we could expect the Bagzo 1 X-ray arrival for runway 28, so ILS 28, and there is the Bagzo 1 X-ray. And what we do now is simply flick through the legs and check for any route discontinuities, which there sometimes might be, and looking all good. Now at this point we activate the flight plan, but we don't execute that just yet. That's because we need pilot monitoring, who's currently doing the walk around, to check the routing with the pilot flying, make sure it's all good. Once he's satisfied checking with the pilot flying the route, we can execute it. Now, straight away, once we've got the routing, we go to initref, which goes to the performance initialization page. And at this stage here, the load sheet is the master document. We copy that information, but if we don't have a load sheet yet, to get all the this information to pre-populate this page from the operational flight plan. And you can see here the estimated zero fuel weight is 58.7 tons. That's based on the amount of passengers who have booked flights and the checked-in bags we're expecting as well. The reserves come straight from the flight plan of 2.7 tons. That's the amount of fuel we need to divert from our destination of Dublin to the alternate, in this case Liverpool, and land with 30 minutes of fuel remaining. Our cost index, looking at the flight plan, is 6 today. Our cruise level is flight level 340, and we can execute that. Now the cruise wind we get also from the operational flight plan. We take the top of climb wind, which in this case is 319 at 12 knots. And the ISA deviation, this is the deviation from the ISA standard temperature at top of climb, that is 0, so we can leave that as the default amount. Now again, at this stage we don't do any performance yet. We must do this with the other pilot to ensure there's no errors. We don't allow one pilot to do the calculations independently, otherwise in case there's a mistake you wouldn't know about it. And then we go to the takeoff page. Again, we leave the flaps blank at this stage, and also the V speeds, because the pilot monitoring is still doing the walk around. So at this stage here, the FMC is fully loaded. Now again, this is where it differs from the cold and dark setup. From the transit flow or checklist, there really isn't that much to do on the overhead panel. All we do is the identical panel scan flow, just verifying all the switches are still in the correct position. So standing by on the flight controls, we check all the lights are off and all the switches are on. Nav transfer and display switches are all normal and auto. Fuel temperature's fine. Fuel pumps are still on. We don't need the center pumps. We only check the crossfeed valve on the first sector of the day. DC and AC metering panel, we generally don't use this, it's more an engineering function. Camera utility, in-flight entertainment, passenger seating systems stay on. Generator disconnect switches are in the auto position. Electrical still on the GPU, which is what we want. Emergency exit lights are on. Now, the faster seatbelt sign only goes on after refueling's been complete, but we're still simulating that we're uploading fuel at Gatwick, so we'll leave them off. Window heat is on, probe heat stays off, anti-ice is good, electric hydraulic pumps are all on. Doors, we've got the forward entry because we're just disembarking with the air bridge, and the cargo doors are open. Air conditioning and pressurization panel looks normal. Temperatures are fine. Air conditioning packs are even auto. Isolation valve open for engine start. We'll just leave the APU bleed off because it's not running. And I just set this to 4,000 feet just to set up this tutorial, but looking at the operational flight plan, if you remember, we're cruising at 340 today, and the land altitude we'll set at 250, which is what it will be in Dublin for the next sector. Perfect. Pressurization mode selector in auto. Light switches, just the wheel well and the steady light on, which provides the green and red port and amber lights, the nav display lights. Start switches go to off, and we just switch the igniter to left for the next sector. And this is now where we set up the MCP for the departure. Now I'll show you how we do this. If I go to the captain's seat, and here on the left hand side you can see the Lamborn 5 mic SID. Now when you're setting up the SID, we want to make sure it matches what it says on the plate. So what we'll do, we'll go to the plan, and you can see here the Lamborn 5 mic. It says the SID initial climb on 258, 2.3 miles off India Whiskey Mike. Well, you can see here we've got 259 Bravo, that represents that waypoint. But for raw data, what we'll do, we'll tune 110.9, which is the ILS, which is actually still tuned from the approach, you can see down here. And that way, for departure, we have the DME distance as a backup for that initial turn. Now, the initial part of the departure then, once we get to 2.3 miles, is a right turn. We're going to intercept the 079 or the radial 259, the reciprocal radial from the Detling VOR. Now, what we could do is a backup. We can tune that on standby here. So if we put Detling 117 decimal 3, and what we'll do, we'll tune that the other side. That means if we lost the FMC on departure, we can still navigate raw data, how we used to do it in the olden days, basically. And you can see here, the inbound to Detling was 079. So all I'm going to do on the captain's side is put 079. That way we can use Vorlock. And what that would do, it would track that course inbound radial if we lost the FMC. Now, following the rest of the departure, you can see when we get to a distance of 11 miles from Detling, we want to fly the Lamborn 5 mic. So we'll make a left turn to Lamborn, inbound on the 337, which is the inbound course to Lamborn VOR. So what we'll do, we'll set that up on the first officer side. and we'll put 337. And again, if we lost the VOR, we lost the FMC, we'll quickly just tune up, land on VOR and standby this side, and then we could use that as raw data. Now, stepping through the FMC, we still want to check that it matches the plate. So you can see here all those points we mentioned. Oops, if we go to plan here, there you go, that allows us to step there. You can see the waypoints we've got here, the 31 mile point, maximum altitude of 4,000 feet to 29 miles from Detling, that matches the chart. We can climb to 5,000 feet at Nexox, I can see that on the chart there, and then we're going to get to the 259, a kilo point. Well, kilo is the 11th letter of the alphabet. You can see here that represents 11 miles on the chart, and there you can see the left turn inbound to Lambourne, and we could climb to an altitude of 6,000 feet. Now you can see on the chart where the restriction is, but it says flight level 60 in the FMC. It was a really quick fix for that. All we need to do is put 6,001. You can see on the legs page that's now changed to 6,000 feet. And if I zoom out here, you can see how the ND matches what it says on the plate. So we just do that as a raw data backup. Now, just for track keeping, another thing which is an SOP, you don't need to do. You can put 220 knots for the initial turn, but you can see that's part of the speed restriction on the SID anyway. And just to finish setting up the MCP based on that departure, we could set 4,000 feet plus 100 because we haven't got the clearance yet. And we can turn on the flight directors as well. Master's on the captain side here because he's the next flying sector. So I know that was a lot of information there, a bit of a bombardment, and you need to be a bit of it in the know on instrument rules and stuff. But that's how we set up the 737 for the Lambourne 5 Mike departure. That's what I would set up if I was flying that sector today. So if it was a bit too much information all at once, just pause, rewind the tutorial, and hopefully it'll get back to you. All right. Good, so now we set up the MCP, we could carry on with the rest of the panel scan. So order brake to RTO, reset the fuel flow for the next sector, and trim, we can leave where it is, flaps, verify they're up, checking all the switch positions here, going down the rest of the pedestal. We tune up now the Gatwick clearance delivery to get the departure clearance, and from that point on, check the radio panel, and it's all pretty much set up for the next sector. Okay, so carry on with the rest of the transit turnaround. The first officer's back from his walk around. He said he's not found anything, and refueling's also been completed. You can see there we've got 6 tons on board for the next sector. So now the refueling is complete, we can put the fasten belts on, so the passengers who probably be boarding at this stage know that they can sit down and fasten their seatbelts. Now, at this stage, we would go through a complex routing check and briefings with the other pilot. I'll just step through what we do exactly, okay, at each stage. So once the pilot monitoring is happy, sat down, got himself a drink, he'd ask the captain would ask for the route check, so we'd check for the routing of the aircraft. So we'd carefully step through the routing, verifying the origin, destination, the call sign. Check for the routing for any errors, so the first officer would read it in this case, or the pilot monitoring would read it in this case, and the pilot flying, the captain, would step through it, and then we get to the progress page here. And on the progress page here, you'd verify that the distance of the route matches the flight plan. So you can see here, to get to Dublin, it's a distance of 356 miles, and it exactly matches actually what the operational flight plan says. What we're looking for really is some big gross errors. And you'd usually get the fuel on arrival here as well. I have no idea why. I think with PMDG you might have to execute the route. Yeah, in reality you don't need to execute it. But now I've executed it, you can see the fuel on arrival is 3.5 tons. We're just making sure that's more than the reserves, which it is. The reserves are 2.7 tons. So once the routing's done, we then execute it. And you check the ND to make sure that blue dash line's gone magenta, which it has. We would then do an instrument cross-check with the other pilot. So we'd first have a look at the clock, confirm the time, so 1600 UTC, the QNH of 1034, which indicates 210 feet, the MFRA of 1210 feet, flight directors are on, and the standby instruments are all set. Now, whilst the pilot flying is reading that, the pilot monitoring would obviously be checking his, and he'd call out any differences or errors. We then do a very brief takeoff brief, so we just simply say for today it's going to be a left-hand seat takeoff, runway 26 left, planning for flat 5 for departure, and it's a noise abatement departure procedure number 2. We then mention anything that was specific to this flight, so if we needed icing or adverse weather or wet speeds, but it's a pretty simple departure. I would also mention some of the threats for the departure as well. Well, London airspace is very busy, and we could expect a low stop altitude and very complex taxi routing. So there's some of the threats we could list today. We then do an emergency briefing, usually done on the first sector of the day. The captain would describe what he would do in the event of a rejected takeoff, and also each pilot flying for their first sector would describe what they would do in the event of an engine failure. But we'll imagine we've done that as we've already completed the first flight of the day. We then brief the taxi routing. So if you remember, we are on stand 3. It's going to be quite a short taxi for runway 26 left, probably push back to face either south or west, and we'll plan for Bravo, so we could use more conservative performance figures, and it could be either via Zulu or Alpha November to taxi holding point Bravo. If we get taxi to holding point Mike or Alpha, we'll just use the Bravo intersection for our performance today. We then briefed the SID to the pilot flying, but as I gave you quite an in-detail briefing already, he discussed the stop altitude for the departure, the tracks in the FMC, stepping through each point, any warnings, anything of any pertinent information. Probably mentioned the MSA as well. It's no issue really with terrain here, so if we had any issues, we could at least climb to 3,000 feet and we'll be clear of all terrain surrounding Gatwick Airport. Now, that's essentially the pre-flight preparation complete. The only thing we have left to do now is the performance. Okay, so now to do the performance, the captain would check the load sheet carefully, which has been completed by the dispatcher, checking for any gross errors he might have made. And once he's satisfied the load sheet's correct, he would enter this information into the FMC. Now, as soon as we get the load sheet, what we do is we, oops, not the taxi light there, we pop on the APU. That's in preparation for us to disconnect the GPU. We could also use it for the takeoff calculation performance as well. We don't have to do some mathematics to reduce the N1 thrust setting, which I'll explain a little bit how we do later. Now, checking the load sheet, we'll just imagine it matches what the estimated zero fuel weight is on the operational flight plan, which is 58.6 tons. And all you have to simply do with the PMDG NGX is tap this twice anyway, and it'll update you with the actual zero fuel weight of the aircraft, which gives us a gross weight today with the 6 tons of fuel we're taking of 64.7 tons. Now, what do we do with that figure in reality? Well, we take that 64.7 tons, we punch it into the Boeing OPT app with all the external weather conditions, and you can see on the left hand side, that's what we have for Gatwick. We've got runway 26 left via the Bravo intersection, the runway's dry, the wind 230 at 3 knots, temperature 6 degrees, QNH 1035, QNH has dropped slightly since we started the tutorial. Thrust rating, we leave in optimum, flaps 5, air conditioning auto, and the anti-ice, engine wing anti-ice off for departure. And that allows us today, you can see here, well, the updated MFRA of 1380. So MFRA could be based on several reasons. If it usually changes, that means what we have is an obstacle in the departure, and this means that we have to climb a little bit higher before we accelerate in the event of an engine failure. And you can see here with assumed temperature of 22K, 40 degrees, we have 86.9%. So we do is 22K, 40 degrees, we put a 40 as our assumed temperature. Now the APU is running, we can pop that on the bus and watch what the how the N1 figure changes when I put the APU bleed on, 86.1 to 85.3%. For some reason, it's not matching the Boeing OPT app. Now, in the real aircraft, it does. It's usually within 0.1%, but just for the purposes of this tutorial, accept the error, and we'll use these performance calculations today. Now, once that's complete, we can then go to the takeoff page, verify the flap setting, so flap 5, and you can see there the V speeds match pretty much what the OPT says. If they're within 1 knot, we can accept the Boeing OPT. So we've got V1 of 141, VR of 141, and V2 is 145. There's a spurious warning about the arrival later on in Dublin, so we could disregard that. And what we do, we set V2 on the MCP, which I did earlier, 145 knots. Now, and also, some people have asked me in the past, how do you calculate your stab trim setting? Well, PMDG and in some of the real aircraft in the 737 you have this CG feature. Our aircraft don't have that. We just set the trim based off the load sheet, and you can see it's 5.26 units. You have to make a small adjustment to that based on your thrust setting. I could just tell you guys, for 22k we have to add 0.5 units, so the actual stab trim would be 5.26 7-ish units, and you can see that's roughly what I've got set there. So that's it. That's essentially the takeoff performance now complete. Pop that down. MFRA's updated to 1380. Obviously the first officer would do that as well. Now at some point we'd want to disconnect the ground power as well. You can use the FMC and the PMDG to do that, and we get the air bridge disconnected and all the doors and hatches shut. And as soon as that's complete, one thing which I haven't done yet, which probably actually have done, is get the departure clearance. Now for those of you who are familiar with VATSIM, it's very simple. You just call up the clearance frequency, tell them what stand you're on, what information ATIS you have, the QNH, and they will give you a departure clearance, and they usually 99% of the time will give you the one that you have on the operational flight plan. If you remember, it's the Lamborn 5 mic, and climbing to 4,000 feet, and all we do there, we'll set 4,000 on the MCP, and let's imagine we've given a generic squawk, something like that, 2307, okay, and that's it. As soon as we've done that, the aircraft in this configuration is fully ready for departure. Okay, Mariana, could I have the transit before start checklist, please?
Gear pins.
They are removed.
Oxygen.
Tested 100%.
Yaw damper.
That is on.
Fuel.
Okay, so we required 5.8 tons, and we have nearly 6 tons on board, and 4 pumps are on.
Fasten belts.
They are on.
Window heat.
They are also on.
Air conditioning and pressurization.
PAX auto bleeds on set.
Pressurization mode selector.
Auto.
Instruments.
They are cross-checked.
Auto brake.
RTO.
Speed brake.
That is down detent, and what we also do, we take this opportunity to do a quick takeoff configuration warning check.
Parking brake.
Set.
Stab trim cap switches.
They are normal.
Radios, radar and transponder.
Set and standby.
Rudder and aileron trims.
They are free and in the 0 position.
Takeoff briefing.
Discussed.
PA.
Complete.
FMC CDU.
Is set, and what we do, we just verify the pilot flying has the takeoff page and the pilot monitoring has the legs page.
N1 and IAS box.
Okay, so they are auto. Our thrust setting today is 22k with a thrust rating of 85.3%. Our V speeds are 141 with V2 145. Set.
Stab trim.
Is 5.7 units set.
EFB.
Is airplane mode and stowed.
Phones.
Our mobile phones are off.
Flight deck windows and cockpit door.
Okay, so we physically check that the window is latched. We give this a quick pull to make sure the window isn't open and that the lock fail light is extinguished and the flight deck door is locked.
Doors
are closed.
Passengers.
And what we do, guys, we wait for the cabin secure sign for the cabin. We put the chime or no smoking sign to on, and we just simply say secure.
Transit before start checks complete.
Thank you very much, Mariana.
Derp.
Okay guys, that's the end of the transit turnaround tutorial. I hope you found that interesting and learnt something new. It's pretty much at this point you just simply call for your push start clearance and go and complete your IFR flight to your destination. Also a massive thanks to my partner who was dragged away from her Netflix to help me read the transit before start checklist. You might hear her again in the future as I continue to make tutorials using the 737. As ever, if you have any questions you'd like to ask me, feel free to leave that in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe, fly safe, and I'll see you again very soon. Take care, bye bye.